Got it. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me. Great. Okay, and you can see my presentation.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Okay, well, again, I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. As I said, my name is David Gruen. I'm the Columbia River Coordinator for the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. Prior to serving in this role, I served as a postgraduate fellow with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Region 10, which is this region, which serves Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska, supporting their water division. And I hold a Master's in Environmental Quality, Environmental Science and Management from the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the Hood River Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program. So without further ado, let's jump in. The Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program started right here in the Hood River Watershed over 20 years ago. And I know I see Brian in the room, and I know there's others who have long-standing connections to this program. But I think it's really special to be able to come back and present on some of the great work that's gone on in this program over 20 years, and to see how its success has spawned in iterations of this program in other watersheds and even other states, and I'll get into that. But the goal of the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program is to keep pesticides out of the streams. And the way that this program attempts to do that is to promote voluntary changes in pesticide use practices that protect and improve water quality. And really the heart of the program is really three pillars. The first is local leadership. This is a locally led program here in the Hood River watershed. The Soil and Water Conservation District staff does a lot of great work in terms of collecting samples and conducting education and technical assistance. And there's other partners that I don't have time to mention, including OSU Extension and others. But that local leadership is really critical to the success of this program, because that's the foundation and knowledge of the local conditions that are really driving pesticide use. The second pillar is water quality monitoring data. And that's really important, because we need to understand when, where, and what pesticides are entering the streams to get a better handle on water quality conditions, and where we need to prioritize additional management actions. And that's where that third pillar comes in, which is really just targeted education, outreach, and technical assistance, driven by the first two pillars, driven by that local leadership to understand the on-the-ground conditions, and driven by the water quality monitoring data. I will note that the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program is an alternative to regulatory approaches under the Clean Water Act or other federal environmental laws. So I just want to highlight that since it started 20 years ago, it's now expanded into 8 other watersheds in Oregon. So those watersheds are highlighted here on this map. I'm not going to get into all of them, but I'm going to dig a little bit more into the program background. And the other thing I wanted to say is just quickly come back to the fact that, I think this program is a point of pride and for the state in terms of a collaborative approach. And I think it's important to recognize, I want to share that, recently EPA Region 10 actually funded the Washington State Department of Agriculture to launch a pilot pesticide stewardship program up in some Washington watersheds, which is heavily modeled after the work that's gone on here down in Oregon. So I think it's really exciting to see this sort of model expand. But what we do is we monitor for 134 different pesticide products or their breakdown products in the water. And based on that monitoring data, we identify the streams with elevated pesticide concentrations or a high number of detections. And again, that's where we really want to prioritize our actions. And we then collaborate with our local partners to implement voluntary management practices to keep pesticides on target. Then, of course, we continue to monitor throughout the year. We typically monitor more or less on an every other week schedule in the spring from March until end of May, and then have a little break in the summer, and then we pick up again in the fall and sample again on a more or less every other week or so schedule through October, depending on the year. And then we routinely evaluate the water quality monitoring data. We do attempt to go out and move these sites around based on what we're seeing. So that is, if we see really good water quality data, we might say, this doesn't suggest there's an issue with pesticides entering the streams, and we're going to move our sampling to evaluate other portions of the watershed. And then again, based on that water quality monitoring data, we really implement effective or try to promote effective voluntary actions that can keep pesticides out of streams. So it depends on the local areas. But we've done things like spray drift reduction trainings and practices. And I know that there were some work done up there with the, vertical patinator up in the Hood River area. Installing weather stations to basically just not spray when the wind is too high or there's other environmental conditions that could lead to drift or other transport of material. Integrated pest management training and technical assistance, including biocontrols, which is the use of natural predators or pheromones. And I think Chris Adams, if he's here today, will speak a little bit about some of that work. Of course, we also like to promote the use of less toxic pesticides and promote buffer strips and minimizing spraying near streams. So those are some of the ways that our education efforts that have been launched under the Pesticide Stewardship Partnership Program to keep pesticides out of the streams. I don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to quickly move by this, but the other great thing that this program does is collects for free waste or unneeded or unused pesticides across the state. So we do travel around every year. We hold about 2 to 4 events per year. It's totally free of charge to the user. We are about to release the schedule for this upcoming year. I don't think it's been released, but check back on ODA's website or ping your local soil and water conservation district staff or others, and we can get you that information. If we're not around this year, we'll probably be around in this region in the next year or two. And just keep that in the back of your head. Again, totally free, but we do require registration so we have a sense of what products are coming. I want to quickly transition and just go back to this water quality data and provide a high-level review of kind of where we've come and the great progress that's been made in this watershed over 20 years based on our water quality pesticide monitoring data. So what you see here on the screen is a plot of exceedances of the benchmarks that we use to evaluate when pesticides likely have an impact on streams. So red and orange are not good here. That mean that there have been detections of a pesticide above a level which is likely to impact aquatic communities. And what you can see is when this program started, following the first detections or the detections of organophosphate pesticides in the water, we had a high number of relative exceedances. You can see the large red bars from 1999 through about 2008. But following good work and I think the promotion of voluntary BMPs and other actions, you can really see that there was a strong decrease in the number of exceedances. So indicating that improving water quality trends. And over the last couple of years, we've only had a single exceedance since 2019 of a water quality benchmark. And I just got to say that is overall really good and encouraging. We're still, we want to ideally we get down to no detections of pesticides in the water. That is the ultimate goal, but I do want to highlight the great progress and continued reductions and steady decreases in detections through time that we're seeing up in this watershed. And it's really credit to the local partners and the local growers and the local community because pesticides really come in from all sorts of different activities. It's not just agriculture, of course. I do want to highlight that we are aware, we do understand that pesticides are used widely in our society, including on right-of-ways, including in rural residential areas and urban areas. So I just want to highlight that is an understanding of the program. This is a graph that just shows a different surrogate measure here, but similar story. It only goes back to 2010, but you can see here the total number of pesticide detections. So how many times do we detect a pesticide at all in the water each year? And you can see we've had a really good steady decline from about 275 detections in 2010 to less than 100 over the last couple of years. And we saw a minor uptick between 2021 and 2022. But overall, I think if you look, the trend is improving water quality. And I think that's really great to highlight that we were detecting far fewer chemicals per year on an annual basis over the last decade. And so that's what I want to end with, just a quick roundup. Again, over the last 20 years, improving water quality trends really driven by voluntary changes and practices to keep pesticides on target. Over the last 3 years, there were 0 pesticides of high concern, and that's the metric that we use in this program that was developed by US EPA Region 10 for the use of Oregon, Idaho, and Washington. We do have 3 pesticides of moderate concern. I'm not going to get into that into detail at the moment. If you have questions, please feel free to follow up with me or my colleague at ODA or your local contacts at the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and we can have a further chat. But I guess I just want to leave it with that. I know Kris is going to follow me and share a lot of great work that the Soil and Water Conservation District is doing. So I'll be around to take questions and can take a couple right now if we have time for it. But otherwise, I really appreciate folks' time and really hope to be out there for the next meeting of this group. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. If you have a question or two, we can ask away. Let's start with Dick.
Yeah, I have a question about what's the sampling strategy when you're doing pesticide detection? Are the same sites repeatedly sampled year after year, or is it more kind of randomized through the watershed? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really, we work closely with our local leads. I would say we pick sites based on general and representative land uses. One of the parts of the program is we intentionally never sample locations that are just draining from a single property, for example. We're not trying to highlight or single out individual property owners. Our goal is to get an understanding of what's coming from generally represented areas. So that's the first thing. There are some limitations. Of course, we also consider ease of access into the site and safety and other considerations. But overall, we do pick sites based on our local leads understanding of kind of when and where pesticides are being used and where it might be a good opportunity to look for them in the water. Typically due to just hydrology, oftentimes we look at tributary mouths. That is where a smaller tributary enters a larger one, because we can then segment up that upstream watershed and it's somewhat more easily delineated. But in this program, I want to say it's also important to know that we do move these sites around, as I said, based on the evaluation of the data. So this is not a long-term ambient water quality monitoring program where you pick 1 or 2 sites and just keep it there for a very long time. Now, we may have sites that do stick around and are durable through time, but we also do go out and look across different areas of the watershed and essentially try to identify areas where pesticides are impacting water quality. So that means if we have a large number of detections at a site, we're probably going to continue to sample there to try to drive voluntary measures to reduce those concentrations and see that effect. Conversely, if we do have a site that has really good water quality data over a number of years for pesticides, we might say, we don't think that water quality is being substantially affected by pesticides. We don't believe the data is not suggesting that pesticides are entering the stream in large quantities or frequently, and therefore we're going to move this sampling effort and we're going to go look in a different tributary. And there's no really hard or strict rules on that. It's really a conversation we have with our local partners and based on the data.
Relating to the last figure, about how many samples per year are being collected?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so it's changed through time and will continue to change through time just based on the program budget and different things. But I guess I would say, to generalize, each PSP basin takes about, I don't know, maybe 50 dips of water per year. Kris Schaedel, maybe you can jump in if I'm wildly off there, because Kris has been involved for a long time. But I would say about 50 plus or minus. Some years can be more, obviously, and some years a little less. But Kris, if that's incorrect, please jump in.
No, that's right in the ballpark. Yeah. I'll show you in here in a minute. We sample 4 sites about 11 or 12 times a year. Yeah. Cool, thank you.
Bernie, you have a question?
Yes, I was going to ask about Roundup, but then I realized that's an herbicide. Are herbicides also monitored, and is Roundup in use and detected, and how are those doing?
Yes, that's a great question. So when I say pesticides, I do mean all products that are labeled as pesticides by ODA, and I'm not going to speak for that agency, but it does include herbicides, it includes insecticides, fungicides, repellents like DEET. So we do test for the active ingredient in Roundup, which is glyphosate. And glyphosate is a pesticide that is active ingredient, which is used in other products as well, but it is very commonly associated and known for its use in Roundup. We do test for it. The laboratory test is slightly different, and it's a different test than we do for our other samples. And so it's tested less frequently than other analytes in our analytical suite. But that being said, I don't have the data immediately off the top of my head. It is detected in the watershed. Kris might have more information on top of her head. I can go back and look at some plots in a second and get back to you with more information. I do know it's been detected in the watershed. I can tell you though that it's aquatic life benchmark, which again is the level that we use, and it's set by it's really levels that are released by the EPA. The federal EPA, they release values based on data provided by the pesticide registrants when they register the product for sale. And we take the most stringent or most protective value. And that's the aquatic life benchmark or concentration that we compare the measured concentrations against in the water. And glyphosate's aquatic life benchmark is very high compared to other analytes on our list. It's, I think, 11,900 micrograms per liter. Whereas we have other analytes, for example, imidacloprid has an aquatic life benchmark of 0.01 micrograms per liter. And you can, so that just, I'm trying to emphasize that's a really, those are orders of magnitude different in terms of what the science is currently telling us the impact is to the aquatic environment. And so we are detecting glyphosate, but we're not detecting it at levels at a high compared to that. You know, they're at very, very low levels compared to that aquatic life benchmark.
Wait, so follow-up question, it's low because the benchmark is very loose. In terms of absolute amount of glyphosate, how does that compare to the other pesticides that have a more stringent standard?
It's a great question. All the data actually is available on a public website. And I can go back and I just don't have this information. Apologize. I don't have that just off the top of my head. I help co-manage all 9 of them. Kris might know more about the local data and watershed. I can get you this information, but I also want you to know that you can go and look at all of the current and historical water quality monitoring data collected through the PSP program. And I'll put the link in the chat in a second. But if you just Google PSP data viewer and Oregon DEQ, or if you go to Oregon DEQ's website and search Pesticide Stewardship Partnership, you will find a link to this website. It's a free interactive website. Again, it has all of the data collected through the program, and you can actually search by just the Hood River results and just for glyphosate, and you can look at all of the data that we've collected, and you can even look at it in specific the specific locations it was monitored in. So there's a wealth of information, and I'm sorry I don't have that information right up the tip of my tongue, but I can follow up and share some of the data we have for glyphosate if we have time at the end of the presentation.
So maybe we should get to the next, are you presenting next, Kris?
Sure, yeah.
She is. And Alex.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
David. You're gonna stay on, right? Oh, somebody had a chat, let's see, chat.
He did.
Oh,
You want you to share his screen?
yeah, and then he just talked to me, which is more effective.
No.
Okay,
Well, while Cindy's pulling that up, I'll just introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. I think most of you do, but there's definitely some new faces. My name is Kris Schaedel, and I work for the Hood River Soil and Water Conservation District as the conservation specialist. I've been with the district for 10 years, and my job is strange. Conservation districts are strange as well. The scope of work is huge. We do everything from on-farm irrigation improvement projects. We do weed work. We do landowner technical assistance. We help the tribes with their spawning and snorkel surveys and their expanded capacity. We do riparian planting projects. We run a small grant program for orchardists and livestock landowners. The scope of work is huge. It's kind of to protect water quality and aquatic life, but also to support the people and the industry here in Hood River County. So it is broad. So as part of this odd job I get online, we do the PSP program, and we are tasked with implementing the monitoring efforts that David also kindly just gave us the results of very, very briefly. Like he said, there is an incredible amount of data associated with these monitoring efforts. And it is public, it is your information, and you can go to that data viewer site, or you can have a more in-depth conversation with us, and we can talk more about the results and kind of what they mean. So we're tasked with doing the on the ground monitoring work. And then, like David said, that this is really a program that is meant to voluntarily address an issue in a watershed through voluntary efforts such as education and outreach, pest management practices, riparian buffer plantings, and then really just making sure we are asking the right questions and collecting the science that really is answering the questions that we have. So I kind of just wanted to briefly run through kind of what we've been up to and what that looks like here in the Hood River. And this is really, like David said, a partnership driven program. It is, really meant to be driven by the working lands and the people living here and the questions we have and the concerns we have. So there are opportunities to participate in this, to hear the data in a more focused, intentional setting. Every spring we host a pesticide meeting that is open to the public, and everybody is invited to. So if you guys are interested, there really are opportunities to contribute and hear more information. It's okay.
I have a feeling it won't do it because it's on my computer,
Oh, that makes
but
sense.
I can progress for you.
Will you hit the next slide? Or do I need it? You move it? Right. You.
Working on it. 1 second.
This is like,
We all got
So
these jobs because we
complex.
like to be in the.
well, I just
not
realized
to
Steve's
do the-
sharing the presentation.
Yeah.
It's gonna change with Kris, because I'm gonna plug Chris's directly into his computer.
Okay, so as David mentioned, right, we do the monitoring efforts. And so if you guys are interested, the places we're monitoring are we alternate the West Fork and East Fork at Needle Creek. Then every sampling effort, we sample at Odell by the water treatment plant. We sample Needle Creek at the mouth, and then Lenz Creek at the mouth. And like he said, these sites were kind of chosen for being representative of the land use, the pesticide user groups. This is not a gotcha program. We're not trying to single people out. We're really trying to collect data. But it's also not an ag program either. It's all pesticide users. So it's rural residential, homeowners, county right of way, railroads. We're really trying to be inclusive, forestry. It's also selected of, we are a small basin, and these are some of the more significant creeks with anadromite in them. So we kind of already have a more intense interest in these sites. So we've been doing this program for over 20 years and collecting data at 5 sites. It hasn't always been these exact sites. We used to sample mouth of Hood River. I think we used to sample Indian Creek. And for different reasons, we got curious and we'll probably be looking to switch some of the sites here again. In regards to the glyphosate, it's a separate test at the lab, and it is more expensive. And so we are only collecting that at 1 site per sample run, and that this year and for the last couple of years has been at Odell Creek. And I don't recall an exceedance of glyphosate, but again, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. But yeah, it is found, but I don't know that there's been an exceedance of that aquatic life benchmark. But yeah, we were the original partner in this program, and we have kind of for quite a number of years now really showed long-term stable results that we have very few products found. Very few of them are in exceedance. And so we are really in a good opportunity to kind of do some work with our sampling methodologies to really start focusing in on what questions we're trying to answer now moving forward. I think everyone's kind of in agreement that it is really important to have these conversations based in science. And this, the results of this program are not saying there's not still work to be done. But it is good to have an ongoing monitoring effort that is based in science. So yeah, we are going to continue this monitoring moving forward, and we will be moving to a strategic planning. Alex, do you want to hit the next slide?
I don't know why it's
No problem.
not doing that. 1 second.
Okay. So the other part of this is education and outreach. And so for the past couple of years, we have facilitated a air blast sprayer calibration workshop taught by the trainers from Washington State Department of Ag. So this is has been a really successful program. There's a lot of demand for it. I think there's a lot of really positive overlap when it comes to the conversation of pesticides, in that nobody wants to use them. If there were other alternatives, people would take it in a second. They're expensive. You have to wake up before and spray them, nobody wants to be using them. So there really is a lot of overlap to get our pesticide applications timely, targeted, efficient, and effective. And it keeps people safe, it lowers spray bills, keeps drift mitigated. There's a lot of benefits. So we have hosted the air blast sprayer calibration workshop again, both in English and Spanish, and had over 125 students in attendance in the last couple of years. We will be continuing these classes moving forward. In fall of last year, we hosted a pest and disease integrated pest management workshop taught by trainer Leo Garcia. Leo spent most of his career at Wenatchee Valley College, teaching in the Hispanic Orchard Employee Education Program. He's a professor of horticulture and just a gem of a presenter, and he hosted a pest and disease workshop that was well attended, and really it's getting at the more we understand pest and disease in orchards, the more timely and effective and targeted our applications are, instead of just going by calendars. David just said in 2019 to 2022, glyphosate was detected 2 times in Odell.
Was that detected at any level or detected at the threshold for aquatic?
So at much lower levels against the aquatic life benchmark. So we will be hosting another class with Leo Garcia, this fall, again. And Alex, you want to hit the next slide? Oh, I meant to take this out. This is actually, oops. Well, the slide I meant to take out, but since it came up, yeah, there are plenty of opportunities to participate in that, and I really do invite you guys to participate. All right, Alex, you want to go to the next one? And then kind of for the on the ground work outside of just education and outreach, we have a riparian buffer planting program that is supported by Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs, ODA, and then this past year it was supported by Tri-County Hazardous Waste. So really looking at any waterways, you know, in Hood River, it's really death by 1,000 cuts. We have a lot of little waterways that have been manipulated, and it kind of all contributes to a greater water quality. Getting these buffers planted has been a priority. We planted 2,000 feet this past spring and have kind of another few properties that we'll be planting again later this winter. This project is free to landowners. They just kind of have to give us access and we'll get it done. All right, next one. And then, like I said, I think there's a lot of reasons that Hood River Valley is unique, and it puts us in a really, really good opportunity to do a lot of strategic planning work moving forward in terms of our monitoring efforts. It gives us a lot of opportunity to create consistent, reliable, meaningful, ongoing bilingual education programs and workshops for the agricultural community, as well as really bringing some of the other pesticide users into the conversations that haven't really been as present in the past. Moving forward, there's some other opportunities to address unmanaged orchards and homeowner backyard fruit that are sources of pest and disease for commercial orchards, increasing spray programs, as well as support the OSU biocontrol program, which is kind of a perfect segue into the next presenter, Kris Adams, the OSU research entomologist here at the station, who will be now talking about those programs. With that, I will end it. And yeah, if there's any questions, happy to answer them. Yeah.
Now that there's been so much success and a downward trend in detection of pesticide, what are your high levels of concern? What are the top 3 or 4 things you're now finding, and where are they coming from?
That's a great question. I don't want to
Without calling anyone out.
I think it's worth investigating other pesticide users, right of way, railroad. I think it's also worth looking at our monitoring program, our timing, our frequency, and the technology we're using. I think it is worth looking at the analytes and the products, the current chemistries being used. When this program started, there were pests and disease that did not exist in Hood River that are now dominating spray programs, like the spotted wing Drosophila, which is a pest that goes after soft ripening fruits, so the berries, the cherries, and it's a fruit fly. So their life cycle is every 10 days, which is just knocked back the spray programs into a different decade from what they had been prior to this pest. Brian can certainly speak more to that than I can.
Of course, the thing that has changed also is the products used.
Yes.
This valley for a long time and Wasco used aerial fly malathion. And that has been replaced by spinosad. I mean, all these other products that they're shorter lived, but yeah, spray more often. But they're not as toxic.
Yeah, I think, David can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but the Wasco County also has a PSP program and their two primary crops are cherries and wheat. The two things that were of concern from this last year's sampling efforts were glyphosate and malathion, from exactly aerial applications out in Wasco, prior to harvest, I believe. And then glyphosate from.
During
So,
fallow period, glyphosate, a lot of use of glyphosate during fallow period.
yeah, I'm not sure what the timing was on those sequences, but, yeah. So lots of opportunities, lots of questions to be asked, lots of strategic planning to think about going forward. And also, like David said, this really isn't an ambient effort meant to stay here forever. So we need to figure out how to keep the science and information available here, in the spirit of this program. Yeah, what you got?
And I'm just wondering about commercial forestry impacts. So do any of your sample sites, and you probably would, but like West Fork, East Fork, you've got county forest, bunch of private forest,
Yes.
and you national forest. They're all, it's not thought of as farming, but it's ag, even the Forest Service in the Department of Ag.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and so I think that is exactly why those Upper Neil Creek sites were chosen. I think maybe it's kind of coming into light that if we are going to look at if forestry products are getting into the waterways, we need to partner much more closely with the pesticide applicators and their timing, and approach the monitoring that way, because it would just be such a shot in the dark kind of if we were capturing.
It'd be mainly herbicide, I would assume.
That's right. Yes, yes.
And there haven't been hardly any detections, even in the West.
No, in fact, I think,
Of the herbicides that forestry industry uses.
but I don't think we've also taken spray records from when they've applied and what they've applied and sync that up with our
I
sample.
know they use a lot of aerial applications, private forestry companies do. Because I've seen them post, they have to post one time.
Right. The frequency isn't, I mean, usually it's kind of a 1 or 2 in a plantation. So we just need to figure out if that's our priority and look at our methodologies. Okay.
Thank you, Kris. I'm gonna just take a second here to open up yours.
Oh, sorry.
That's
It's gonna be a folder called Talks. Yep, and then inside that folder is a soil and water folder. And that's me. Oh, okay. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kris Schaedel. I'm the new tree fruit entomologist here at McCarrick. I formerly was resident of Michigan, so I did my PhD at Michigan State University under Dr. Larry Goot, who did his master's here in the 80s. And so there's some connective tissue. Helmut Riedel was at Michigan State. That's where he did his codling moth degree day model, and then so there's an extended confusing family tree connection. While we're waiting, I'll give you another little bit of trivia that I wasn't sure how much trivia you guys or how much history you knew, but I'm going to talk about. I was asked to talk about integrated pest management, and integrated pest management is defined really by what it's not. And that the origin story of integrated pest management comes from Rachel Carlson, who did her studies at Michigan State University. That is where she observed all of the bird die-offs that were the result of DDT bioaccumulation in bird shells. So that is the kind of the genesis of IPM was instead of blanket sprays of broad spectrum, long lasting insecticides, looking at more of a targeted, timed approach that is based on knowing that you have pests in the first place and how many pests you can tolerate, and the understanding how to, like, as Kris said, efficiently more surgical. The minimum that you need at the exact time in the perfect conditions, so it's not blowing off site, et cetera. So,
Okay, I'm just gonna take a moment to ask the folks online, what are you seeing, Alex?
It looks good. All set.
It is, so you can see the regular old full
Yep.
screen, you're not seeing a weird next slide thing?
Nope.
Hey.
cool.
well,
Nicely
and that
done.
We'll see that.
Wow. Got career in
Out
IT.
there, but there it is.
Okay. Well,
No.
so
You do it next time.
Exactly.
no, it's all right. I know. Just do it here. Maybe. Right?
Yeah, there we go. And it is a touch screen that you can just like, you just go like that.
Okay. All right, so this is the why you should care slide. Pears in the Pacific Northwest is a $381 million business. Cherries is $1 billion in the Pacific Northwest. So it's a big deal. We are the second largest cherry producer in the United States here in Oregon. Michigan has tart cherries. That's a distant third or fourth in production, but we're up in Traverse cities where all of our cherries are made. Pears, Oregon is the second largest pear producer in the United States, obviously behind Washington. And 85% of the fresh pear market in the United States comes from right here in the Pacific Northwest. A lot of cherries, I took off a lot of other data, but a lot of cherries are exported. And so in order to export them, there is a zero tolerance for infestation. There can be no insects of any kind. Which, oh, looks like it's auto advancing. I better keep up with it. Okay, so integrated pest management. What is integrated pest management? Like I said, what it's not is broad spectrum insecticides that just kill everything. That's how pests used to be controlled. Through the years, we have developed this more integrated system, which involves these 5 steps here. Identify through monitoring what pests are in the orchard. Evaluate how many you have and do you need to do anything. In some cases, you don't need to take action. A little bit of damage does not necessitate getting in the spray rig and spraying anything. Taking preventative steps, so orchard sanitation, removing insects where possible, getting rid of down fruit that are harbingers of disease and insects, taking action when necessary, and then monitoring how you did to kind of close the loop and improve where you can. And so one of the many actions that you can take, and I blew up this so that you could read it, is using a number of different tools, not just the big hammer. So in some cases, augmenting biocontrol, using sanitation, using pheromone mating disruption, which is a chemical that the insects produce to find each other. We have artificially produced that, and we hang it in the orchard, and it confuses the males and they can't find the girls. So there's a lot of different things that you can take. There's a lot of different steps that you can take short of pesticide. All of these insects I've listed here are the ones that your orchardists have to control. Parasilla, common moths, spotted ring Drosophila, which is invasive, brown ring stink bug, also invasive, and now leafhoppers, which vector cherry X disease, which is a non-curable disease that causes the cherries to get small and bitter, and it's you have to take the tree out with a bulldozer. So there's no fix. Currently in Washington, that's out of control, and they're taking out your orchards. So we're trying to stay out from here. Anyway, so there's a number of challenges, but this, I will say that this area coming from Michigan, the Hood River area specifically, is way ahead of the country on IPM. So they're fully embraced integrated pest management and natural enemies for the control of their key insect pests. So this is one of the projects that I'm working on. We are trying to understand how best to control parasilla. And the best way to do it is just to let all of these insects do it for you. So the growers in this area try really hard to preserve and not kill all of these natural enemies that will eat the larva of parasilla, including yellow jackets and bald-faced hornets, where they will just leave those nests in the orchard and just not pick that tree, because there's so much benefit to having those things in the orchard. But what we don't have is an action threshold. We don't know how many and which of these is the best combination to control psylla. We don't have monitoring traps to know the quantity of any of these things. So a lot of it is experience-based, kind of guessing. And so here I'm just showing you, we've made lures and in the lab with a number of plant volatiles that are attracted to these insects, and we're trying to monitor through the season all of these various insects and report it out to the growers and crop consultants so they can kind of keep track of what's going on and decide, trying to build with them some metric, some number that if I have, you know, if I have this, and this at this level, then the parasilla will not be, they will eat the parasilla and I don't need to spray. Right now, they don't really have that. There's some really good crop consultants who've been doing this their entire life. And they have this kind of gut instinct and they know what happened last year and how things are going this year, but we don't have anything you can hand off to the next. That's all right, I'll just keep up. So that's one project where we're just trying to preserve natural enemies. Another project that Kris talked about is spotted wing drosophila. It's an invasive fly and it attacks soft fruit. Obviously, a maggot in a cherry is a big deal and will shut down an entire export. You lose an entire load. You can't send out of the country. So zero tolerance. And as she alluded to, it requires weekly pesticide applications in order for you to sell cherries. You have to. There's no such thing as organic cherries. All the blueberries and you pick raspberries all went out of business in Michigan. There's a couple of blueberry farms that are organic here. You're getting the protein for free in that. There's no such thing as organic without spotted wing drosophila. So
And is that the case with the sulfur? I mean, I know there's an organic cherry place in orchard in Mosier and definitely heavily sprays the sulfur.
yeah, so right. So this is it's not necessarily a topic I want to talk about, but organic is a loaded word
Okay.
because
Yeah.
you have tools.
Labels.
You have tools, they're very weak tools. And so you have to use many more of them. So the scale is, it depends on how you want it gets back to this glyphosate, like the quantity, the threshold that we're talking about, these things are not comparable. So you can use one really good tool and then not have to spray again for 7 to 10 days. You can use a really bad tool and use it every single day that there's cherries on it. Those are different. So organic is not no pesticides, it's different pesticides and more of them, which is complicated, which is, you know,
Right.
which is something we want to work on, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot, so there's a lot to it. And so when I say there's no U-pick, I just mean that if you don't have strong, effective tools for this fly, you have flies in that fruit. So those organic U-pick places just they can't sell that to Walmart. You can't sell that at Rosar's. If you go in and, you know, it harkens back to the times before DDT when people just accepted insects in your fruit. We don't do that anymore. After DDT, it changed everyone's paradigm. I want zero insects. Every fruit has to be perfect, like a picture. And if I see it at the store, I won't buy it if it's not blemish free, right? So prior to World War II, we didn't live like that. You got pet insects in your fruit, and then you fed those to the chickens and you ate the other. We don't do that anymore, right? So spotted wing drosophila has a high bar for zero tolerance and a high pesticide input. But it does have a tiny wasp that parasitizes the larva inside the fruit. Now, this doesn't work inside the orchard, but for all of those blackberries, a biological control agent tiny wasp that seeks out this larva, lays an egg inside the larva, eats the larva, and then you get a wasp instead of a fly. This is a good preventative measure to stop insects from moving from the blackberries into your cherries. So we're currently received a grant and we're rearing this wasp as in addition to 2 other wasps. And then we're also surveying to see how many there might be a dozen other wasps that are native that have learned to adapt to acidity. And if we can identify all of those beneficials and rear them and release them, we can maybe shave a few pesticides off. So that's one of the things that my lab is trying to do. This is brown marmorated stink bug, another invasive insect that is a generalist and just will feed on just about everything. Tomatoes, peppers, corn, soybeans, apples, and pears. So because it's a generalist and it's a landscape level pest, it's just as happy in the big leaf maples as it is in your pears. And so going into the orchard, when we talked about IPM and monitoring, you can go monitor and maybe find 1 or 2 symptoms, maybe not find any. And that doesn't mean that you should spray or that you should not spray because they might just be moving through. So it's much more difficult than other insects that are kind of tied to the fruit and have to develop inside the fruit. The adults fly in, ruin a bunch of pears, and then leave. And then you show up and find damaged pears and you might spray and there might not be anything. So it becomes really challenging. On the East Coast, it was like Armageddon, just absolutely the end of food production because there was just billions of them. Here they've been here for a decade now and we haven't really seen that yet, but there's a couple of hot spots where growers are telling me they've got 50% fruit loss.
Wow.
So to prevent the destruction of IPM here, which they fully embraced for Pericilla, we would like to also release this. We are releasing this parasitic wasp. So it attacks the eggs instead of the larva. It finds the egg masses, lays an egg in that egg, and then you get a wasp instead of a stink bug nymph. This is also technically invasive, but it showed up here on its own over the last decade. There has been at least a dozen instances where this wasp has shown up from Asia and been introduced all over the East Coast and at least 4 times here in the Pacific Northwest.
You said the stink bug had been here about a decade, and so now the wasp has been here about a decade, so they kind of came around the same time.
It's possible. We don't have in order to try to work that backwards and figure it out, we have to do DNA analysis, and that's how we know that there's been over a dozen different introductions, is because they're genetically different from Asia. Yes,
Yeah, cool.
yes, they're genetically not related, and they came from different pockets of Southern Asia. So yeah, so it's here, and it's found its host. It's really host specific. It really just likes BMSB, and it could be in its native range of China. BMSB is controlled. It controls over 90% of the population, so they don't really have it as a pest like we do. We have it as a pest because it was released from its parasitoid. So we are releasing this insect, rearing and releasing this insect all throughout the valley. So this is what this looks like. We raise stink bugs on fresh green beans and vegetables, and then they lay eggs, and like a chicken coop, we go and harvest those eggs and steal them, put them in a cup, and we put that wasp in there, and then the wasps lay eggs in all these stink bug eggs, and we get thousands and thousands of wasps. And so I put this up here because I have to always remind people that this is a penny. That's the wasp we're talking about, not this. So people immediately get freaked out. They think they're going to get stung. But these little specks in this soup cup, those are the wasps we're releasing. And so far we've released with just a small grant from Washington Tree Free Research Commission and just a few hours of maintenance of the chicken coop every day, we've released over 50,000 wasps in this region.
You're rearing them here on the station?
Yep. Cool. Yeah. So we're hoping to keep that going. We're looking for continuing funding. It requires us to go to Rosar's to buy green beans and peas a lot, so, but it's worth it because it's reducing pesticide inputs, and the growers really like it because if they can control this pest and just worry about Pericilla and cobby moth, then we can prevent a lot of additional pesticide inputs. So one last biocontrol that this is the first time in Oregon is, I've started releasing these sterilized cottonmouths. So these, so cottonmouth is cottonmouth is this beautiful little coppery brown moth. And it's the worm in the apple that you probably, you see some gray hairs. Some folks have maybe seen a worm in an apple, but most people have never seen an actual worm in an apple. It's a caterpillar. And it belongs to that moth there, the cottonmouth. So the only rearing facility in the world is in British Columbia that rears and sterilizes 1.4 billion cottonmouths a day during the summer. They've adopted this as a area-wide management program for all of the apple growing regions in British Columbia. They rear, sterilize by exposing them to radioactive cobalt, and then release sterilized cottonmouths all up and down the valley. So they charge everyone a tax. If you live near an orchard, and the orchardists all pay into a tax, and then the government subsidizes the rest, and they have a giant multi-million-dollar rearing facility. And so the way this works is you rear millions of these moths, sterilize them, and then release them into the orchard, and then they interfere. It's fine birth control. So the matings result in no eggs. And so you don't need, they don't need any pesticides. This is their control technique. So we have, there's a startup company, an ag innovation company that I partnered with a long time ago in Michigan. I sent them out here to talk to Betsy Beers in Washington because that would be the easiest. They wanted to work with me in Michigan, but I sent them out here. They've been at this for 8 or 9 years now, and they're selling them commercially in Washington. And we just did the first releases last year here in Oregon. And it's
In the gorge
yes. One site in Pine Grove and one in Deep. Two sites where I'm releasing them as a replacement for pesticides. And we're trying to measure that impact. So I know it works. I've worked with them for over a decade at Michigan State University, and it works every single time. It completely eradicates in 40-acre block.
So can the sterile release program, can that work in conjunction with the pheromone disruption?
Yeah. Great
So they
question.
can work I mean, because the sterile ones, you still want them to find the female. don't
Perfect
you?
question. Yeah, no, it's a very good question. Yes, so
But the answer is yes, they
The answer is
can work
yes.
together.
right, so the answer is yes. The way that pheromone mating disruption works is the sweet spot is about 400 dispensers per acre of the artificial pheromone.
Right.
And that will reduce your fruit injury by about 80%. So the curve is this, flip this around, this is different data, but if you get this asymptotic curve where you have high damage and then it drops down and then it kind of plateaus at 400. If you put 500, 600, 1,000, it doesn't move that needle. So they're really good at finding one another. So, but if you do sterile releases, then the bottom of that as asymptotic part of that curve, instead of just finding dispensers, they find males and females and mate, and then they feel like they have completed that behavioral action and they stop looking. So it does work. They are also confused by the dispensers, but that last 20% that you can't close the gap on,
We're not that confused.
yeah, they're not that confused. That's the only thing he does. That is he's a very one-track mind. He doesn't eat, he doesn't do anything else but try to find that girl following that pheromone plume. So yes, they do work synergistically. Do you get but the question under your question is there a financial gain to do both? So that's a different, the money you spend to put steriles on top of pheromones. I need an economist to work that out. That's a different question. And currently it's very expensive to drive them across the border. Someone has to go across the border with a permit, talk to guards, tell them what you're doing, comes back with a cooler, show them the permit, drive from British Columbia. I meet somebody in Omak. No, I'm sorry. Where do I go? Wapato. I go to Wapato. I drive all the way to Wapato. They hand me my laws, and I drive all the way back. So it's a lot of diesel fuel. There's a lot of cost and handling. But these are the data from the Okanagan Kootenai Sterile Insect Release.org. You can get these data. This is the catch since they started the program in 95 to 2015 when they stopped posting fresh data. you can see moths per trap went from 2 to decimal points. They don't catch they don't catch wild moths anymore, except in a couple of hot spots. This is cotton moth control products, all pesticides. In the 90s, 30,000 liters to almost nothing. So it does work, but you need investment support from at a federal level. You need a brick and mortar facility. And there's lots of benefits. Pesticides are a really important tool and critical, especially for cherries and pears. But eventually, they get in places we don't want them, like the water, like we're talking about tonight. Insects become resistant. And so having more tools in our IPM toolbox is good for a number of reasons. So I think that's my last slide. And the moral of my story tonight is that we are trying to do a lot of different things to reduce pesticide use and give the growers alternative tools that are more sustainable. And Kris and I have been talking about ways to partner and keep some of this stuff going, because I have to find funding year after year to pursue these type of questions in this research. And recently, Columbia Gorge fruit growers approached me about some abandoned orchards. There's some folks who have retired and no longer farming, and those are now just a block of insect pests that then cause the neighbor to need to react more sprays because they have this source of pressure. And so we've been talking about how we can talk to those homeowners, landowners, whoever currently is in possession of the orchard that's sitting there, and see if we can use some of these techniques that are non-pesticide to help them control their pests. So releasing sterile cotton moths no one would know. There's no pesticide, there's no dogs, it doesn't hurt, and nobody would know, and that would reduce their cotton moth pressure. We could hang pheromone mating disruption in there. If there's stink bugs hanging around in there, we could release wasps on the perimeter. There's a lot of ways that I would like to help Mike Doak at Columbia Fruit Growers address this abandoned orchard short of pesticides. So we want to try to be good neighbors with everyone, even those folks who can no longer farm and have reached that age and don't have a succession plan in place. Some sort of stopgap management so that your neighbors don't increase their pesticide uses would be a great thing to hand to Mike with some ideas. So I think we're working on all of those ideas. Before I forget, you were talking about planting riparian zones to try to stop pesticide. It occurred to me, and I wanted to say something before I forgot, that we should sample for beneficial insects to see what shows up once you start planting, so that I can maybe piggyback some research. That's all I have. I could ramble all night to dinner questions.
I know the problem with old school pest management was that the pests would out-evolve the chemicals.
Yes.
From the evidence we have today, does that show that IPM can stay ahead of the pests, and will we see a steady decline in chemical use towards zero?
Yes, hopefully. Yeah, that would be the ideal. So the key with integrated pest management is to use lots and lots of different tactics and attack them at every front, so that no one tool is a silver bullet, but none of the tools are highly impactful to the environment. That's the goal, right? So if we can give them 4 or 5 other great solutions, maybe not, it cures all their problem, but brings their problem from here to here, then the pesticide doesn't have to be used as much. And when you do use it, it's more impactful because the total population is lower. And so it's synergistic. So, and right now, insects haven't evolved resistance to sex yet. So sex pheromone still works. There's no, there's no evidence that that tool is gonna go away. So that's an important kind of foundational tool. Mating disruption and sterile insects is a great tool. I'm trying to work on getting something down here, either in Washington or on this side of the border, where we rear them here instead of here. It would cut the cost substantially because we wouldn't have to import them and drive all the way up there. And it needs to be kind of a local phenomenon. So There's a bunch of companies that rear lacewings and ladybugs. I'm sure some of you bought ladybugs or praying mantises. There's a market for rearing beneficial insects, so we could get some seed money and start that here. I'd like to see some of that here in our backyard, and if I can facilitate this, that kind of startup and help a young company learn how best to optimize rearing and minimize disease and optimize releases, that would be something, that would be a great outgrowth of our lab. And that was a long answer to your question, so. Yeah,
Well, my question's kind of a dumb one, but,
no such thing.
are the, stink bugs that are constantly finding their way into my house, are they likely these invasive brown marmorated stink bugs?
Yes.
They are.
That's
Okay.
them. For sure. That's the other wonderful thing about them is they like to overwinter in houses and structures, barns. In nature, that would be, a hollow tree. But since you built such a beautiful hollow tree, that's warm all year, they really, really like buildings. So it makes it's good. I'm gonna say it's good because it makes homeowners, especially in the East Coast, who don't grow food and know nothing about how food is made. Or they're highly acutely aware of this invasive species and want to support research to kill it.
Get them out of their house.
So it's a way to get everybody involved. Everyone's at the table. They're like, oh, I'm all in, whatever that guy wants to do or gal wants to do. Yeah,
So if I have a couple apple trees at my house and I want to do the mating construction, where can I get that stuff?
yeah, so there's a company called Great Lakes IPM. And this is gonna be crazy because we have to go call Michigan to get stuff sent here, but Michigan, Great Lakes IPM supplies for the whole country. They are a clearinghouse for all of the commercial, for all the chemical companies that make a product but don't want to have like a storefront. They sell to Great Lakes IPM. I think I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't get that at. I was gonna say. Probably not, but this, there are several different products. For cotton moth mating construction, you can get it from like the ag bio. There's a bunch of little like backyard garden supply places that sell ladybugs and organic pesticides, soaps and things. There's a lot of places, if you just Google it, and it comes in.
Does it have a name or is it just falling moth pheromone?
Pheromone mating destruction there, MD. You could do
Chris, can you speak to if it will work on 2 trees?
Probably not the best, but it's fun to buy it, so. So,
Like, right across the street, there's orchard.
so Chris is right, she let the cat out of the bag. The way it works is, there's a male and a female in your backyard, real moths. And you're providing false females for him. And it works best when you have a large area and lots of targets, like 400 fake females. And he finds a false female and then finds another and another and another. And he's just so stubborn, he won't give up. If you only have 3 or 4 dispensers, he'll burn through that in a night and then he'll be at prom. So probably won't work in the backyard, but it's fun to do. I think it smells good. It smells like summer to me because that was my summer research every year is cotton moth pheromone. And if your neighbor is using pheromone, then you could be part of the larger disruptive force. But realistically, if you have 1 apple tree in the backyard, you probably can't put enough dispensers to break up that one.
So what do you do?
Yeah, so that's a great, what do you do? That's a great question. So sanitation is one thing you can do. I mean, that's what I did. I had 6 apple trees at my place back in Michigan, so we had chickens. Just go get all the bad apples and you give them to the chickens and they eat the worms and the apples and we just compost them, get rid of them. But the caterpillar is living inside that apple. So if you put all of the infected fruits that have a little frass, a little black hole, get rid of them, throw them in the compost pile, give them to chickens. That will break their life cycle because they're inside that apple. There's 2 and a half, 3 generations per year, so you have to go out early and then you have to go out later, find them and just get rid of them. Orchard sanitation is the easiest organic method of cleaning.
Kind of getting back to the spotted winged Drosophila, and you're talking about the wasp, the cyanid wasp, or is it a cyanid wasp?
It is a braconid.
Okay, so, you said, I thought that the Drosophila fly would get in blackberries too. So is it advantageous to get rid of blackberries adjacent to orchards? Or are those blackberries, could that be serving as a reservoir for the
Both,
parasitoids as well?
yeah, both, unfortunately, both answers, so.
Because I've heard
So-
both arguments is like, if you get rid of the blackberries, maybe you get rid of the beneficials
You do.
that hang out there.
You do. So the trouble is that SWD is so productive and so successful at reproducing itself that the wasps don't provide 100% biomass. They take the edge off, but you can't use it in a commercial setting because there's that classic predator prey. You need a lot of rabbits before you get foxes, right? And so you get a lot of spotted winged Drosophila before you get wasps. And then the wasps knock the population down, but you're still gonna have some SWD. So if you are running a commercial cherry orchard and there are blackberries within your property line, on your property line, I would take all those out.
Okay.
If you have blackberries across the road, then we should release wasps over there and not accidentally spray the neighbor's house. And that biocontrol hopefully will stop those from coming in and creating a hot spot on that northern edge or whatever. of the
Sure.
Orchard. So we have to do both. They're both true.
Okay, just one or two more, we're kind of way over our time here, so.
The idea of the neglected or abandoned orchards where it's sort of a commons, tragedy of the commons,
Yeah.
like how do you pay for that? To go in and deal with a property that the homeowner can't or won't?
So we haven't done it yet. It's a good question. We haven't done it yet. But the Columbia Gorge Fruit Grower does have money. They have a program, and I'm forgetting the name of it off the top of my head, but it was designed to do just that. If the neighbor down the road had 5 acres or something, or if somebody had, specifically, it was geared towards people who had apple trees or something in their backyard, and you knew they were infected. You didn't want to spray pesticide, but you knew you weren't doing anything to keep up on, you weren't baking pies anymore. I want something, I don't want a tree. They would take it down, they would cut it and get rid of it, and they would replace it with some other flowering, whatever. Japanese maple, something. And so there is a small kitty of money to do some of that. But if it's 50 acres or 100 acres, that's a different price point. So we've never done this before. So Kris is trying to help me. We're trying to think creatively. Is there funding out there that we can use to address this issue? Because the net benefit on the whole watershed, if we spend a little bit here and all the neighbors are not spraying pesticide, then that investment might pay dividends. So we don't know yet, but we're looking at it. And a lot of these homeowners or landowners are aware and they're trying to come up with their own money to do something or lease it. And yeah, so it's an issue that's going to become more and more prevalent because none of us are getting any younger. And so grower and lots of people like myself tell their children, you're not doing any of the jobs I did when I was growing up. So you're not going into construction, you're not going to be a farmer. Like we all want our kids to go to college. There are not a lot of people who say, I want to be a farmer and have my life dominated by worrying about frost and insects, and have a thin margin of profits and lose everything some years. And then it takes an iron stomach. It's not a lot of people coming to the table that want to do that. So we are going to have more abandoned orchards, and we need to talk as a community about succession planning and thinking about where that's going when that owner gets too old to farm. Do they have relatives or sell it to the neighbor before it becomes, because what happens is they stop managing it for several years and they stop watering it, and then it's not worth anything and no one wants to lease it because it would cost too much to get it back to production level. So complicated question. Thank you for your time. I've taken up a lot of Great to meet everyone. Hopefully we get to work together more.
Yeah.